Good afternoon or good morning or good evening, wherever you are. I don't know what time it is for your body. My name is Carly Kutsia, and I'm very happy to welcome you today to this webinar aimed at early career scholars and part of the ASAUKNextGen initiative, where we build collegial networks and create friendly opportunities for young scholars to learn from their peers. Today, we're here to discuss a fascinating topic on the ethics of researcher vulnerabilities. Oops, here's the book. We shall hear from Gino Vlavonou, is that correct, Gino? How I've said it? At the University of Ottawa, and from Rosette Vuninga, who's at the University of the Western Cape. I knew Rosette before. I've not met Gino before. And the project will be introduced by one of the three editors of this volume, Susan Thomson. And it looks to me as if you, each of the editors worked with 2 or 3 authors. Is that right? I think that's a wonderful model. I've not come across that before. I really like that. I can see the intimacy with which you've created the conversation. So the collection is from Boydell & Brewer, the James Curry imprint. And there's a special offer on this volume today on the whole series. So if you look on Twitter, you will see the code if you want to order this. The collection provides deep reflections on the ethical and methodological challenges of scholars who study the social lives of Africans while being also an African. So I think that is what is unique about your project, that you are, and of course, being African doesn't mean one is always studying your own country. I know Rosette, for example, works in South Africa. So we'd like to hear your comments on this and just your insights into the self-awareness that this project asked of you. So what is interesting to me in particular about this is that I think you're not writing directly about your research, but you're writing about the process of researching. So Susan Thomson, Professor Susan Thomson, can I hand over to you to introduce your 2 authors, and then we can take the conversation from there. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Carly. This is terrific. I'm glad to see Gino and Rosette once again. I'm grateful too for that lovely introduction. You captured a lot of what we tried to do. An Ansoms and I have worked together for a long time, and we really wanted to focus on bringing early career researchers into the Anglosphere. So this is exciting for me to be able to work with and mentor and actually be mentored by. I think senior colleagues should be open to learning from their junior colleagues at every turn. So An and I worked with Aymar Nyenyezi Bisoka to try to develop a series of research on the subjective interpretive course of research. So what is it when you're a producer of knowledge and things are coming at you in the field? How do we write about that? And we've worked in different ways in our individual capacities, but also as a group to try to find ways to make more space in journals, more space in edited collections. And we had debated at the beginning of this project, should we do a special issue? And we ultimately decided against it in consultation with our authors, as Gino and Rosette may recall, which would be better for you. We wanted to have the time and the space, really the space to be able to work with these authors. And Gino and Rosette may say more about this, but we did work and we were transparent in the introduction. I worked with these people, An worked with these people, Aymar worked with those authors. And we tried to just lay bare not only the process of how to publish and how to produce a cohesive edited collection, but also how to work with scholars who are in progress. So Rosette, for example, has not yet finished her PhD, very close to finishing, but was in process doing both of those activities at the same time. So being reflective about your research as a way to appreciate the vulnerabilities of the type of research, but also to be open and honest and transparent about the ways in which we are producers of knowledge and our biases actually come in. So those of, in the American Academy, we're not particularly good at thinking about that. So that's all I wanted to say by way of introduction. Last thing, the book is tiny and affordable. It's $27 without the discount, in hopes that scholars would put it in their backpack and take it wherever they may go. Of course, there's also an ebook, but I am a firm believer in the hard copy. It's just a different experience. So on that note, I'll turn it over to Gino and then Rosette. Thanks both.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Carly, for this wonderful introduction and also of the project, broadly speaking. I think I'll be speaking for about 10 minutes, probably. To start, a little bit about myself and the project. I graduated, I think, last year, right? 2020. Yes, in August, September, I graduated, and then since then I joined the Social Science Research Council, based in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a program officer there, where we work with the UN, mostly, helping them think through some of their activities. We are what we call the UN Think Bridge. And so I do support the work on Africa, peacekeeping, and then the Central African Republic, which I know as the best. So to come to the project, I think it was about 2017 when I came from field work, and one of my dissertation advisor suggested that I get in touch with Susan regarding this wonderful project, because then I came back. I was full of, I'll say, contradictory emotions right after the field work. It was unsettling to say a few. My research project wanted to understand why people in the Central African Republic were claiming to be true Central African, right? So you have this 2013 coup, then some rebel groups called the Seleka claiming to represent Muslims, and then other vigilante groups claiming to represent the Christian population. And then there were literally fighting each other, and the Muslim population also was kind of being targeted. And then some part of the population and the vigilante groups were claiming we are true Central Africans, right? And on that basis, they were chasing Muslims and they were fighting the rebel groups. So for me, it was really about understanding what does that mean, and on a broader level, these kind of discourses were rising in other countries, whether it's the DRC, we have the same thing in Kenya, in Cote d'Ivoire, where people claim to be true, identity holder, whether it's through Cote d'Ivoire, through Congolese, through something. So what does that mean in the Central African Republic? And I started my field work from May to October 2017 in the Central African Republic. Then to come to this project, I think it was at the same time really liberating to have the space to write, and also work closely with the editors. Two things really that I think I'll present quickly, and then we can discuss, and people can also go read the book and the chapters we wrote. First was that I'm from Benin, so I'm a Francophone speaker. I grew up in Benin, moved to Canada in my early 20s until graduate studies and then my PhD. Benin, when I left, was still considered this poor country, low income. Anyway, you know this stuff. So for me, doing field work in the Central African Republic, really, I was thinking that I was going home in brackets, right? So I'm going back to the African continent, and from what I've read, about the Central African Republic, it's also a poor country. So I was expecting, to see some similar living conditions, and there's this tension that I think I can now say more clearly. Tension being that Africa is diverse, right? So, Africa, you have all these countries. So Africa is a diverse continent. And at the same time, we kind of claim this unity of being African, right? So if I go to the DRC, it's like, oh, I'm in Africa. If I go to Ghana, I'm in Africa. And when we claim, oh, Africa, there's, hey, Africa is not a country. We have several countries. So for me, there's that kind of tension. So I was going back home. Then I get to the Central African Republic, and yeah, I realized it's kind of a little bit of home and not quite home, right? So I fitted in some local, I say, norms about being an African, right? Respecting elders, how I approach people, how people receive me, how I conduct interviews. These kind of things, I say, interacted with the way I will conduct, my field work. And with all the preparation I had with, the dissertation board, the review committees, and I was not prepared for this kind of, I say, encounter, right? That you go in the book chapter, for instance, I write how getting consent from political elites was difficult, in the sense that I was not expected to be this procedural, right? So before starting the interview, here's the interview, protocol. I'd like to get your oral consent, and then I'll hold, the data for this long, and this is how we will conduct the interview. I'll just come into the room and it's like, hey, how are you? How's your family in Benin? Then they'll just start talking. Like, okay, like how do I ask for your consent, right? Because you just started the discussion. Of course, I write in the book, right, that I do get consent, but most of the time with these political elites at the end of the interview. And so now that we spoke, I'd like to get your consent about using what we discussed. And of course, the consent is, continuous. If anytime you do not feel comfortable for me using this, I'm reachable at this phone number, email, etc. So for me, this kind of tension is what I want to put out there, right? In terms of consent, first thing. The second thing will be the access. And again, how these kind of African norms just interacted with the whole process. Accessing various rebel leaders, those at least I was able to meet, or political elites, facing literally the same thing, to build rapport, to build trust. Some of them will kind of just give me money, right? It's not a huge amount, right? So it's like, oh, you are the young African here. Take this to buy phone credit, take this to take taxi, take this. And some of my listener will recognize this, right? Where you're in some of the African countries as a young someone, of course, it's different when you're a woman, because you never know what comes after receiving this kind of, money. But for me, it was like, take this and use it for XYZ. And then saying no would mean, hey, I may be going contrary to some norms. It's not usual for me to just say no. It will be, is it because you're coming from Canada that now you don't want to take this money? Even if, again, it's not a huge amount of money. But these kind of things really kind of interacted with the way I conducted my field work. And it's, I think, an experience that needs to be shared, right? Some of my colleagues, whether in Africa, from the diaspora, could be aware of how it interacts with their own field work. On that note, I'll stop there, then hand it over to Rosette. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gino.
Thank you, Gino. That was wonderful. I read your chapter and I really enjoyed it. yeah, we come back to that story of you being taken in that car to somewhere and then you didn't get that interview. So yeah, as for me, I think what we have in common is that we both felt like insiders, though at different ways. I also, so my own research is on Congolese immigrants in Cape Town. I myself is one, I am one, yeah. And I've lived here for about for 17 years now. So I basically grew up here. I arrived here in my early 20s and yeah, so I didn't go immediately to school. I took another 3 years at least looking for life, if you see what I mean. So yeah, I worked here and there as a waitress, as a receptionist at some guest house and so on. And then I went to school finally in 2008, where I did my undergraduate. I registered at the University of the Western Cape for first year undergraduates to major in sociology and history, and also did some anthropology. And then after that, I did my honors, my master's, and now doing my PhD. So I've always, my research has always been on Congolese migrants since my postgrad studies. I started with my honors, which was on how Congolese women understand xenophobia. Obviously, that was, I think, was inspired by the 2008 xenophobic attack in South Africa and all the debate around it, that people are misusing the word. What does it really mean to people? You know, what do people mean when they say they are experiencing xenophobia in South Africa? And I wanted to see what the examples of those things they would give me. And so, yeah, and then for my master's, I wanted to study popular culture. And I wanted to see the kind of conversation that are produced between film produced by Congolese abroad. South Africa, again, was like where I focused, and film produced home. And you know what they, you know, the kind of conversation that are produced, especially in relation to living outside the Congo in a relatively developed country, like in Western countries and South Africa. And so I wanted to understand that and kind of, you know, and how that portray Congolese identity, those films, you know, the kind of debated identities of Congolese that they produce. And then I did my PhD, and I wanted to do my I wanted to research on these tensions between Eastern and Western Congolese that was growing. So as you talk about these identity politics in most African conflicts, I wanted to look at how those migrate, you know, because during, and what everyone knows about the DRC war or conflict is that it has created this rift between the East and West of the country, okay? Between the war zone and the capital, the region, the Kivu region and the capital especially. And you know, and there's been this politicization of Congolese diasporic identity with now the democracy since 2008 and 6, the elections in the DRC, with the people in the government and the opposition, those ruling and those in the opposition going to campaign among Congolese migrants, among the diaspora. It's created problem and, you know, exacerbating these identity conflicts among migrants. Here in South Africa, I wanted to see how that has been in relation to the tension that grow every day between Eastern Congolese and Western Congolese. And as always, my research, I'm an historian, but I barely work with archives. So I see myself now as an ethnographer, or everything I did so far has been based on ethnography. And apart from my studies, I've also published on gangs and gender in South Africa. So, and also in Bukavu, my city in Eastern Congo. So I've already said that I'm from the Kivu region myself. So I guess going to the field, I went as a researcher, but I must confess that it has not always been like this. So I think when you go there, you talk about your varying identities that come up. So for me, I've noticed a lot has changed from 2011 when I first did fieldwork doing my honors and to my PhD in 2000. And between 2016 and 2018, I was kind of doing my PhD and my fieldwork for my PhD. And of course, this has brought me many ethical opportunities, but also challenges. So I wasn't so aware of many things. Like to begin with, for my honors and my masters, I didn't go with any ethics clearance. I never asked why, but it's also something to do with my institution. It's recently they start taking these things seriously. When you're working with human subjects, you have to kind of, apply for that ethical clearance. So for my honors, I just went. And the people I worked with was like, most of them were my friends. And we were working together. Some were waitresses, some were in my neighborhood, others were my friends were hairdressers. And so they were people I knew. And I never struggled to secure, appointments to interview. In fact, some of them would call me you said you'll come, you were supposed to interview me. And we would meet at my place or at their place. We will make food and sit and talk. Same for my masters. We would watch film together and comment. I would go to some friends from Kinshasa and Bukavu. We would watch some Congolese film together and they would give me ideas. And sometimes they'll be like, get a call I've got this new film. Do you want to come watch it? It will really help for your research. So unlike, what I came to experience for my PhD research, people the same start running away from me. Like they were a bit reluctant to speak to me. And I didn't realize that, and also new people I interacted with as well. Some of them wanted to talk to me just for other reasons. They have other things in the back of their mind, who I was and why I was trying to. Others didn't want to talk to me because also with all these problems of many conflicts and migrating, and so much talk of spies. I think you also went through that, and it's the paranoia of spies from from the enemies of Congo, talking about neighboring countries. There's so much talk about that here. And also there are also spies of the government, Congolese government, and no one fits that stereotype than me, as a woman, and they would like to understand, why do you do this research? If you say you are a historian, why are you going around interviewing people instead of going to the archive or talk to older people? So I was confronted with also intellectuals in the field. So I'm already talking about my chapter. I didn't organize how it will come, but there I am. So what I mean to say is now during my PhD, I realized how my main identity came to, to show, and there are so many, and there is a way I identify myself. There is a way I'm identified by my research subject, and it's different from each participant. So there is I am a woman. I'm Eastern Congolese. I am also my ethnicity, my ethnic group, because I'm now researching among Congolese. So we know each other, and this thing of tribe in inverted comma, they always ask you about that. So where are you from and why are you doing this and so on. So, but mostly my identity of a student, as a scholar, if I can say that. And that too has created distance between myself and my former participants. So there'll be question, you're meeting someone for an interview, they'll be like, I haven't seen you for a long time. So you're still studying, and you'll spend maybe the first meeting will be all about you. How did you get here? How do you do it? Who pays for it? And you have to explain that to almost many people, everyone. And of course, my own trick was that at the end of the first meeting will determine whether I'll meet you again or not, especially if you are a new participant, even for old one, because now I can tell that, you want to talk to me or not. So that first meeting, I was prepared that I'm not getting much today. It will be, I know about me, and that's the day where I establish trust, and make sure that there'll be something I'll get from this person. So it saved me some time from not wasting my time again and their time, because I know you, Gino, you didn't. There are so many interviews you finally couldn't get after, you go up and down, you wait for people for 3 hours, and then at the end, they don't give you anything. So I noticed that before. And then I think after the third person did that to me, I knew that the first meeting, okay, we, as we say, on prend contact in French, we just establishing that thing, okay, we just go on or not, okay? But so was a very important thing, like the most, which I was aware of my many other things, but I didn't know that, also, being as educated now as I am, which I create distance between me and my usual participant from my honors to my masters. Because women I interviewed for my masters were not new. Most of them, I worked with them during my honors. But now those women didn't, they were not so welcoming during my PhD. Okay, so, and there are also issues of having to deal with intellectuals in the field. So research has shown that, I want to talk about that more, research has shown that Congolese are immigrants, even though they are in informal sectors in South Africa, they are among the most educated. So an article by Steinberg, who is comparing them with Mozambicans, so that they could really make good skilled migrant labor. But unfortunately, the system, maybe with the English language as well, they found themselves working as security guard, car guard, while they hold university degrees from home. And so some of those really confronted me in the field that too I didn't expect. And I had to explain my methodology, as I said, in relation to my research, my discipline. I said, I'm an historian. Why am I doing field work? Okay, so I met a woman with an anthropologist who lectured me on this whole thing about Malinowski. And I really never read the guy. And that's a problem when you think of yourself, people tell you are now a multidisciplinary. And there's at some point you realize you know a little of something, but really not deeply, you don't know anything at all. And so I know Malinowski, of course, from my first year module. But the thing is that I don't really know much about his thing as an anthropologist and who's behind the fieldwork that we do today. So there are two men who studied in Congo. She knows all that because she studied in detail, there. And she taught me how I'm doing it wrong. If you think you're doing fieldwork the anthropologist's way, then you are doing it wrong, because you're supposed to move in with maybe come to my house, and then because I'm from Kinshasa and you can observe how we do, you move in our community, move this side, move this side move this side of Muizenberg and stay with us, because most Quinoa will live this side. Muizenberg and Retreat, we are many this side. And that side of Belleville, you live there. They are side of Baswahili, that's your people. So if you want to understand, come here, attend our churches every day, come eat with us every day, come to our Nganda, come to our business place where I make hair and see, because you are doing it wrong. Interviewing people is not enough to say you are doing a field work. So it was kind of weird, because she was explaining to me in front of the husband, and it's almost like she's saying, you see, she's not who she says she is, she's not doing it right, there's some problem here. And things like that. So every time I have to defend that, and she's not the only one. And so talking about SPY, all that to inspire, them to think, as I said, probably I'm not just researching, okay? And then some people were so happy to welcome me. And they said, record my interview, and please, my name is this and that, put it there. Okay, so they want to use you to pass their message as well, because with social media, people like to publish, and this class of combatants in the Congolese diaspora, the one that the movement emerged in 2006, after 2006 elections, but they were very, very famous during the 2011 elections in the Congo, but in the diaspora, it's a strictly diasporic movement, and it's known to be anti-Kabila. And so, Eastern Congolese, for them, they are also Quinoa, like they are Western Congolese, mostly from the capital. They speak Lingala. And I am from East, and I'm here talking to some of them. And I will want to tell me, go tell your people this. You write, it's not us, it's you people. And say, I said it, my name is this and that, and things like that. So and those are decisions I have to make as I write based on information you give me, because it's my duty to protect you. And sometimes it's not you gonna tell me how I will do it. So, so those are little things sometimes we need to talk about in the future, because we tell them, okay, I understand, but at the end, I'm not going to put your name when I know it's going to compromise your security, because as you know, based on Susan's work, you don't know ethics of dissemination. You don't know who's going to read your work and for what. So for me, I just wanted to, like, you know, I like to be safe, but I still don't feel like that is fair for someone who insisted to do that. So that's the place where you have to explain you are in academia, in an academic, you're not supposed to do that. You are not there to say who's right, who's wrong. You are just trying to get information to write your research to back up whatever argument you have in your head. So, but it's not, I'm not here to cut this problem. And so, yeah, that was one thing. And my own people too were like, good. Some of them were like, good. Now you are going to like say everything how we've been bullied with Western, you know, people from the West and the capital, you know, who think they are the only real Congolese. And here, Gino, again, is part of your research. So the thing is that Eastern Congolese, we are like generally thought of as less Congolese in this whole identity and citizenship discourse of the Congo War. And so that's especially from the West, the capital. So we are always associated with Rwandans, with Uganda, with the traitors, with whatever. It's our region which has been at war. We let the enemy in and we are benefiting the most from the conflict. We talk about this whole thing that Jackson Cold War economy in the Congo. And so it's the Eastern Congolese themselves benefiting from it. So, but the thing is that so my people wanted me to write to clarify that fact that we are all Congolese, or to speak against what Quinoa say about us, you know, in terms of identity and Congolese-ness and so on. And so that too was not what I was after. But sometimes you don't need to debate too much with them. You just want that interview to be done. And whatever condition they give you, as long as it's not like they're making you sign something. So it is there. So I was confronted with all those, so many things. And sometimes I had other problems during focus group discussion, because now you ask a question, they answer it, and you ask another one, and you want to understand, but don't you think, for example, one of my arguments I make is that what caused our problems here, these tensions between East and Western Congolese, it's mostly around the issue of, you know, of Congolese-ness versus Congolese refugee-ness. That's two different things that are growing here. The real Congolese in inverted commas are not the real Congolese refugees. Now you see that in South Africa, every Congolese claim they are refugees, and they use that conflict in the Eastern Congo or in the Congo in general to say that they need to be here, they have the right to be here as refugees. But there are some groups which South Africans think they are the real refugees. So the Eastern Congolese, where the conflict is, those qualify, others don't. So it's becoming a problem that Western Congolese are constantly, the application for refugee status constantly rejected, and they only give those, mostly when they give is to Eastern Congolese or someone who can prove that they come from a conflict zone, you know, because some people are not from there, but their story can prove they are from there. And those stories for people who are not from the Eastern Congo, they are often for sale. So it's a whole, my second chapter is about those networkings of refugee papers in South Africa and Congolese, and the fact that Eastern Congolese control them. So they've left, like the thing is that they've left the Congolese identity to Western Congolese, and they've appropriated themselves Congolese refugee identity. This is ours. You do not qualify for this. It's only us. And you get this a lot in some places where people are talking, like when I attend some associations meeting, like a ethnic group and the regional groups and also others. And you get sometimes information is one of the things that brings people there, and information about things that they can get, you know, how to access something as a refugee, like that can be maybe a chance to be repatriated to a Western country, a third country we call it, by the UNHCR, or I don't know where they are giving some grant, 400 rand for food, or where, you know, if you are a refugee, you can go and take a free medical care, or these scholarships for refugee and from the UNHCR. So you'll hear like people literally saying like, no, please keep this information to ourselves. Remember, don't share it to Kinwa and Katange. So people from Katanga and from Kinshasa. So people from Kivu will say, this is for us. We are the true Congolese refugee. And this is our COP, as we say. It's our thing. You know, we keep it among us. They will really insist on that. And so when during a focus group discussion, I want to say, don't you think that's causing problems? And now they say, now we want to defend them. I thought you are writing for us, and now it seems like you want to defend these people. So why are we here? Sometimes they really get angry at you and want to tell you what to write. So those are other things I think I didn't think of, where I think like here I can access information easily, but there is also that tendency to manipulate you into what to write. And if you are not careful, you'll end up losing whatever, how do you say this now? Whatever objectivity, however little it is that you want to keep as a researcher. So for me, I think those are some of the things. But as well as I said, and so it's also like as a woman also be a single woman researcher. Okay, Congolese culture is the same almost as Gino said, where he was to be considered as a servant, call him my son or whatever. And here, when I call a man, like, let's meet for an interview, and he will come well dressed. And if I said in a coffee shop, we want to argue who's paying for that coffee. I mean, we will argue, like it will be a struggle. And I can't take people like that at my place, like, you know, let's meet here. No, so a random place like at university, maybe on a bench, sometimes it worked, but with coffee shop, and I started to cancel those, especially, I didn't get that problem with women, you know, they'll let me pay, no problem, it's automatic. But men, their reflex will be, I'm taking that bill, I'm taking that bill. So my strategy was sometime I get there, I ask what is eating and drinking, and then I'll just pay it to the counter without asking for the bill. It doesn't come to my table, because then we're gonna fight about who's paying for it. So there's that thing that people see you are a woman and you need to be taken care of, and when you are not single, they want to call you at the when you are single, they want to call you after midnight, like, are you done with your research, or are we still meeting? Because I remember there's something I didn't tell you. You don't know sometimes if that really is for research or something else. But I must say, at the end of this, I made very good friends, and I think I must admit to that. But one has to be careful, because all that, and they also, when you're interviewing somebody's husband, and sometimes I like to do it where the wife is as well, at their home, or when they can meet, or if I know the wife, I'll tell the wife I'm meeting with your husband. But there are people I don't know them really. I don't know their families, like security guard that I know from places where they work. And so those ones are sometimes I meet them, then we stand and talk about that. So for me,
thank you, Rosette.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to.
Thank you. It's really interesting. I know Rosette. I know she can talk in fluent paragraphs without needing even to think. There's a flow and a structure and an argument. Thank you very much, Rosette. So two things really attracted me to this book and to this project. The first one is, of course, the topic, which you both have spoken about so eloquently. But the second one is also the networking that the project itself did. You know, a lot of your research is about networking, how to access information, how people access grants and opportunities. But it seems to me that this project did that also for you. So there's a kind of family tree. You know, you're in this group of researchers now who've supported each other, who've thought alongside each other. I see both of you have links with the SSRC. So that's another kind of family tree that links you. Do you work for SSRC, Susan? Are you one of the mentors or not? Okay, so that's how I know Rosette. So there's like a SSRC family on the screen. Then there's the family network of, or the affiliation network of Susan as the editor who worked with the two of you. And just the kind of things that are enabled by meeting an editor like that at a particular time in one's life. So I wondered if we could take one further step back. And Susan, if you could talk to us about the process of how you selected the people who were in the project and just the process of accompanying each other as you put together this wonderful book.
Yeah, thank you for that. We worked with people we knew. So Gino mentioned that his supervisor had reached out to him and recommended our project as a possible research, like a publication opportunity. So to close the family loop, I did my postdoc at the University of Ottawa. I'm a Canadian, but I live in the US, so people think I'm American, but I am not. So Stephen Brown is the link there, and Stephen is an exceptional mentor, and it was a model that I tried to emulate as I moved through my career. I also used a model that I learned from David and Catherine Newberry. So most of my research is on Rwanda and the Great Lakes of Africa. So I kept that relational approach alive from this point at which I received my PhD. I received my PhD in 2009. And then ironically, we just returned to Halifax where I did my PhD to do a festschrift for my two supervisors. So having that deep relationship model certainly informed our thinking. I've worked with An forever. An and I both, I guess, to be honest, were scarred a bit by our research. We've been targeted in different ways, definitely as white foreigners, but also as women, and as women of a certain age and experience. So we had talked for eons, and how can we begin to support scholars who are doing this work but have no way to sort of enter into the Anglosphere, as we call it, because that's where most of the metrics for jobs and everything find themselves. So Gino reached out to me with an exceptional abstract, and we worked closely. We probably did 5 or 6 drafts, wouldn't you say, Gino? Like, it was not, we tinkered a lot in each of the chapters. And then Rosette, I met in Cape Town. I spend a lot of Cape Town. I'm affiliated at the University of Cape Town. I've taken Colgate students to Cape Town, and we actually met through a Colgate grad. So I had a Colgate colleague who was doing a postdoc at the University of the Western Cape, and she introduced me to Rosette, and we met at a coffee shop in Observatory, actually, like probably 5 years ago. And we just knew that we could work together. So I mentioned it to Rosette. And so it's really just being with people and having a bigger vision of like, what is the kind of work that we want to produce. And I can say too, I'll announce it here, An Ansoms, Maria Abderosier at the University of Ottawa, and I have worked with Jacqueline Mitchell at Boydell and Brewer to make a Decolonizing the Academy series. And we haven't received any manuscripts yet because of COVID. We really haven't pushed calls. But we realize that we want to build that series that we can then turn over to, the next generation of scholars, potentially, Gino, potentially Rosette, anyone who might be interested, for us to use our capital as tenured professors to build a series. Because decolonization, as we know, is like a buzzword, but what does it actually mean? So I don't think just because Rosette and Gino are from the continent that this work is decolonial by no stretch of the imagination. And I also reject these critiques we've received that, you shouldn't use the word field. So explain to me, like particularly white men are like, don't use the concepts that we traded on for years. No, I'm not going to do that. So we were mindful at every stage and trying to figure out how we could move like the Francophone voice into an Anglophone voice. So Rosette and I worked on that most closely, but it's a different way of thinking when you have a different language. So we were mindful of language as well.
That's so inspirational. And, you know, it's I mean, I want to congratulate the two of you for being in this network, for managing to be in it, because it's these kinds of family structures that enable one. You know, there's the publication, that's one thing, but it's growing the person and growing the scholar and growing oneself, your sense of yourself within a field. That I think these are the things that are soft skills that no one talks about and you can't really quantify. It's also the kind of work, Susan, I think you would probably agree with me, that promotion committees are not that interested in. So, you know, the kind of work of editing the work of others or putting together an edited collection is not normally regarded as high quality scholarship. But I think it is the most valuable work that can be done, because one is really, you know, you're sowing so many fields for generations to come. And I think that's the thing that I really loved about this. It's very clear how the sort of kinship and the peer relationships of the authors in the volume enable each other. I wonder if you could say something about whether authors in the volume, so now I'm really looking at the sort of mechanics of putting the volume together. Did you have authors read one another's work, or were there only external peer reviewers to do that?
We did not have authors read each other's work unless we thought the chapter would be useful to the development of their argument. We worked quite closely on, Aymar and I, on keeping a cohesive narrative, because I have been, you know, socialized in my early career, like edited collections are a complete waste of your time. The metrics don't count in the way that you just indicated. And I've always thought a cohesive edited collection is actually like a real gift. And we worked closely with our peer reviewers who had like pretty substantial comments. Actually, we were told to break up the intro and to change this and to change that. And it was really the work of the editors. And so we put the sort of arc and rationale for the book in the introduction, and then we put the debate that the debates to which it contributes in the conclusion. So it can be used, I think, as standalone single chapters or as a training guide. And one thing that's been important to me since I've lived in the US is to build a real sense of scholarship and affinity around the work of doing field research. So political scientists in the US, for example, they'll go grab a data set and spend a week in a place and they're experts. I find this so offensive. So we've tried to work within I've tried to work within American professional associations to get human subjects research and ethical and methodologically rigorous human subjects research recognized as like a valuable qualitative contribution. And it's informed my teaching. I now exclusively teach interpretive methods when I teach my methods courses. So we worked as a cohesive unit, but we kept our small groups. I worked most closely, as I mentioned, with Gino and Rose.
I mean, I take your point about, oops, am I muted? No. The point about decolonization being a sort of a word that's lost a lot of its power. There's not much activism left in it. But this kind of group thinking, group work, working together as a collective, I think is an excellent example of that. Can I maybe turn to you two, Gino and Rosette, and ask you about what it's meant for you to be in a book rather than, or in addition to, published articles. And so I often say to young scholars, think your CV 5 years ahead. Think of the committee in front of whom you hope to be in 5 years and do the things they're going to want to see. So if you could just say a few things about, you know, I'm not asking you how you're making your CV, but, you know, what do you think this has done for you that a published article would not have done? Maybe Gino, if you go first.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think it's also useful for me to hear, you know, the discussion and how you pick, you know, clues from it, and for me it's interesting. To your question, I think having this book chapter in broadly speaking was useful for the connection, the group thinking, knowing Susan. We've never met before, as we were saying, so it was the connection for Stephen Brown. But then I think we managed to meet at ASA in Boston, if I remember, 2018, probably after this. Then I was very happy, right, to meet her. Then we discussed quite a bit. And Susan was even helpful later on commenting on my book proposal. You know, she helped me work it out so that I can submit to a university press. So you see that from that collaboration, then it's moving on to something else. And in the beginning, at the beginning of my career, yes, I've been socialized into, you know, book chapters might not count as, you know, articles, and yeah, so it's like, do not invest a lot of time in book chapters. But taking the advice and then looking at, for instance, you know, literature, what's out there. Some excellent book chapters have been cited, you know, so many times that then you see that what matters is really to have the story out there, to make it public, and then it's helpful to whether young scholars or even seniors, right, to have the story out there. Yes, it might not count the same thing as, you know, an academic article, but your story is out there to help people think better. And you draw from it other connection, you draw other work for later. And for me, that's even more useful than just thinking academic article. One bit of advice I also got, I think, was think critically about who you want to be in conversation with, whether it's through a book chapter or an academic article. Who do you want to converse with, right? So, and interpretive methods really speaks to me. This is what I try to use in my dissertation, even when I'm doing discourse analysis. It's not the usual kind of en vivo type, but really going through each of the interviews, trying to decode and code and all that, but manually, and then thinking through some of the interpretive tools. So working with Susan and other authors, for me, it's nourishing, right? You have the peer support, and I can reach out to Susan and then say, hey, I'm working on this. Can you look at it? You know, I'm struggling with this idea. And that kind of peer support, it helps you in academia, right? Because at times as a racialized scholar, you're not always sure, you know, how you navigate these spaces. And having mentors who are willing to listen to you, give you advice, and help you through the projects is really helpful. So I'll stop it there. Thank you.
I just want to, Rosette, before you answer, I just want to pick up on something also. The model of mentoring you describe is slow. It's not microwaved. You know, so there's this idea that, you know, the mentor comes in, you plug them in, they mentor, you blossom, you successful. And in fact, mentoring models are not like that. They are sustained over years, and they go in different directions. So I think a lot of what we're saying today has to do with not just trusting those markers that are shown to be success. The published article, the big journal, the journal with a big impact factor, the quick publication. In fact, what we are saying is that they're slow forms of knowledge and slow forms of network building, as in your research as well, that are the things that really make us grow as scholars. Rosette, did you have something to add?
Yes, not much. I think also the networking. And like Gino, I've already knew Susan, and she was already mentoring me before the chapter. So yeah, but I also now know Prof. An Ansoms and my home country, Aymar, whom I met through these networks, and others. So for me, that was good. But on the question of book chapter rather than journal article and other things, I really must confess that where I am now, I think anything is good. I never really thought that it mattered whether it's a journal article or a book chapter. It's now I'm learning these things. Yeah, I must say that. But it's my first book chapter. So I guess it was something new on my CV, and compared to I've already had the journal articles and the book review and other things. But also I enjoy the process, you know. Writing in English is never easy for me. It's really is a struggle, but I'm happy that I meet people like Susan and Anne and other editors who kind of see like what I'm trying to say beyond my messy writing, and they can guide me like patience to get there clean. So that's something I didn't get, for example, elsewhere when I have my experience with the special issue, for example. It was so I was so isolated. It's like I almost figured out everything by myself, and yeah, so I can say that. And also I love the network. Susan is always there, and so yeah, for me it's something new on my CV. It's my first book chapter, so I'm grateful, and yeah, stop there.
Thank you, Rosette. So I think we're going to end the official part of the recording here, and then if you want to stay on the line and we can talk more private matters. But thank you, Professor Susan Thomson, soon to be Dr. Vuninga, Dr. Vlavonou. Thank you all very much for giving your time and for this wonderful project that you've shared with us. And I guess what I like sum it up is slow research, slow thinking, slow networking. That seems to me the secret of this wonderful project that you've shared with us today. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording now.